Go ahead and turn that on now. So I'll say hello and welcome to the training for using MySQL with C#. You should have done a little bit of this in the past with the database class, probably have not touched it since. I'll say this assignment is designed to use the same database you set up there, so hopefully you still have that. So I will cover real quick some basic steps if you did go ahead and delete that. So the pieces you're going to need is you'll need MAMP, which you can get from mamp.info. It's a free download. Make sure you do not download the Pro version. Let's say the non-Pro version is free, the Pro version you would actually have to pay for. That runs the servers that the database has to run on. Then you will need SQL Pro. Which is a free download from SQLpro.com. Then from there you'll have to start the MAMP server. And then you'll have to use SQL Pro to connect to those servers. And this is actually all part of the setup. Once you have this set up and running, you don't have to repeat these steps. So you'll connect. And for that, you'll use the string that comes up when you start the servers. You will now select socket, and then for the address, you'll use the address that comes up on the MAMP page when you start the servers. And with that, you're going to use root for the user and root for the password. Once you've connected, if you haven't set it up before, you deleted your setup, there'll be a drop down in the upper left for databases. If there's nothing there, you'll have to create a new one. To match what will be expected later in the program, you should name it example database. You'll see mine will look different because when I was setting it up, I was on my own and named mine differently. So what you'll see for me is example DB. If you already have it set up, you want to use example database instead, because that's what you should have named it. So from there, there's let's see, in the files you're given, there's this one here, example database.sql. You'll import that into SQL Pro. And execute it. And that will set up the database for you and populate it with data. The other thing you need to make sure you do in SQL Pro is go to the users. Will be a selection on the right side. If you don't have a user named DBS admin, you'll want to make a new user. Name it, oddly enough, DBS admin. And give it a password of password, because that is the most secure password ever. For that user, you will want to click on the tab for global permissions and go ahead and grant all those. And then you want to go to the schema, make sure that you apply this to the example database. You want to grant all permissions that are schema related. example database. That gets you as far as the setup you should have done for the database class. One additional setup item we're going to do, which this will also help you when you get to VFW, because you'll be all set up and you can say, Lee, I'm ahead of the game here, I'm ready. We're going to create a file to contain the IP for our server, which you should have that from your previous setup. If you do not, I will have to get the directions for how to find your IP. But once you have the IP, you're going to want to go to if you just open the Windows tab, you can type this, pulls up this PC. We'll wait a second for that to open. Just running a little slow tonight. If there's any questions during this process, go ahead and put them in chat and I'll respond to them as I see them. So what we're going to do here is we need to go to the local disk C, create a new folder, VFW. You can do that if you hit Control-Shift-N as a shortcut key. Then you'll need to rename it. And you want to rename it VFW. I already have the folder, so I'm not going to do that. Then inside that folder, you see I have a file called connect. You'll have an empty file, so you just control-click, say new, and you want a text doc. If you don't see the .txt extension, that's fine. It is a text document. You're going to name it connect. I already have the file, so again, I'm not going to repeat that. So that will give you a blank file. Inside that file, the only thing you want to place in there is your server's IP address. And the point of this is when you do the connection string, instead of hard coding your IP address in there, we're going to use file.io to load the IP address and then add that to the connection string. What that will do is that allows you to turn in your project and I can grade it without having to go in and edit the IP address in every person's project. And it's the same thing for Lee. When you do the turn in for the database project for him, you're going to load your IP from file. And since everybody has theirs set up the same way, loading from the same place, using the same names, it can find his IP instead of your IP, and he doesn't have to go in and edit all the projects. So once all of that is complete and set up and ready to go, so one last look at the information here. Okay, we'll go ahead and open Visual Studio. Now we're going to do a new project. We'll use console application. Pick something meaningful. Okay, so I'll go ahead and create the new project. And the first thing I need to do is come over here. You'll see I don't have my Solution Explorer visible. I just have to find the tab over here, select it, I'm going to pin it. usually unpin that when I'm doing a lecture so that I have more screen space for the projector. So I can see the files in the project. First thing we're going to do is we have to add support for MySQL. Microsoft has their own version of SQL that they want you to use. They don't stop you from using MySQL, but there is a couple hoops you have to jump through. So for the project, we're going to go to Tools. We're going to select this option here under Tools called NuGet Package Manager. It's going to pop out a couple options. The one we want is Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. Now we'll select that. Here it has a couple of tabs. You have installed, updates, consolidate. I'm going to go to Browse. I'm just going to search. I'm going to search for MySQL. And it actually comes up right here. What we're looking at is the MySQL.data by Oracle, version 6.99. Just have to select that. Let's know what project you want to install it for. And there's only one, so select that. You'll see once you do select it, you get the uninstall option. So we're going to hit the install. And then we have to accept the license in order to install it. We'll go ahead and accept that. It'll pop up a README. Not really much to see here, so we can go ahead and close that. And now we can close the NuGet Package Manager. And now we're actually ready to do some code. So the last couple hoops to hop through for in order to use MySQL, we need to add a using statement. This one's going to be MySQL.data. And we're going to use the MySQL client. And we're going to use two more, so I'll go ahead and add them now. That's going to be using. This one is system IO. That's so we can do the file IO to read in the server IP address. And then we will also be using system.data. So with that, we're all set up and ready to go. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a MySQL connection. I create this as a variable for program, and it's because I'm going to try to follow good coding standards and keep main as the only static method in the program. I'll go and name that con for connection. I do like to use an underscore to preface any member fields or member variables. And I will go ahead and default that to null, just because it's a good practice so that you can use null checking to ensure safe usage. And because we're not making this static, I will need an instance of program. Say program, even though it contains your static main, acts like any other class. So we can go ahead and create a variable of it, create an object of it, and assign it to the variable. So first thing I want to do now, we're going to use the instance, if we can get Visual Assist to give us the right information. Con, we need to make a new MySQL connection. And it helps if I remember the keyword new. There we go. Now for this, I'm going to break out the functionality a little bit, try to keep things a little more readable. So I'm going to make another method here, void, we'll call it connect. And we'll make sure that it gets called by going instance.connect. If we come down into the connect method, so the first thing we need to do to make our connection is we need our connection string. So I'll make an additional method called buildConString. And this is where we're going to need the IP address. So here we will go ahead and do a string IP. We'll do some file IO, so we'll do a using statement. And we'll just use a stream reader because it's quick and easy. Now we need to specify either a stream or the path to the file. Well, we established the file path. It's C:, it's the VFW folder, and the file name was connect.txt. There's a couple of different ways you might see that string written. The less common form is using this form of slash. The more common form that you might see uses the other slash. And with that one, because that slash is used as an escape sequence and can trigger has special meaning, you actually have to do it twice. The first says just use it as is, which is part of the reason I prefer the other slash. So the other option you might see is an @ symbol in front of it. The @ symbol tells the compiler to just treat the string as it is, don't do anything special to it, don't format it, change it, or anything. So there's a couple different formats you might see it in, just to increase the fun. And here, there's just one thing we need to do to get from the file. We need to go ahead and read. I'll just do a quick read line. That should go ahead and give us our IP address. And that'll allow us to build the string. So we'll go ahead and start putting that together. I'm actually going to use interpolation to help me put it together a little easier. Let's see. So it should be server gets, and here's where we need the IP address. So using interpolation with the money sign means anywhere there's the curly braces, it's actually going to evaluate what's in there to get a value and then change it into a string. So it's an easy way to insert that into the string. Now I'll go ahead and add on the other parts that we need. We need the user ID. This is something where we could have it passed in, set by the user, something like that. We already know what we need to use for our setup, so I'll go ahead and hard code it. If you have a different username, go ahead and type that in instead. Now we need the password. We'll add in our OSO secure password. And we need our database. Now for most people this is going to be if I can type, example database. For me, because mine is named differently, it's example DB. And let's see, we need the port. So unless you did something weird in the setup, the port should be 8889. Okay, now that we've put the string together, it may look kind of weird because we're not returning anything and we're not passing anything in, but because this is a member function or a member method of the class, means we have access to the member variables. So we use our connection field, access its connection string, and assign it the common string that we've put together. So connect, we need to make sure we have our connection string. So we'll make sure we call build con string. And once we have the connection string, we're actually ready to try to connect. I'll put this in the try block. Again, we're using the member field. Call open. And if this doesn't work, it'll throw an exception. So to make sure that we know that it worked, I'm going to show this again just because I used a shortcut. If you do CW and hit tab twice, that'll fill out console write line for you. In here, because we know if an exception is thrown, it'll get skipped, we can go ahead and say connection successful. It's just nice to get some feedback so you know that it did in fact work. Now we still need to catch it if there's a problem. It'd be a MySQL exception. In here we're going to make sure that we can output to the screen what the problem was. There's a couple specific ones that we will handle, otherwise we'll just output the generic message. Depending on what exception is thrown, there's some specific numbers that'll be set. First one we're going to handle is case 0. That one we're just going to go with the generic exception message. Next one, case 42, that one is an error code that means that it couldn't resolve the host address. So we'll go ahead and add that in here. Oops. Helps if I put the string in first. Put the quotes in there. And for completeness, we'll go ahead and display the connection string we were using. And the last option, or last thing we're going to check for here is the 1045 error code. And that one is an invalid username or password. And probably should never hit this, but we'll go ahead and add it just for completeness. We'll add a default case, and so in case it's none of those. Then outside the switch, we're just going to go ahead and do a console write line, so I'll CW tab twice. And then we'll go ahead and display the message so we see what the problem was. Okay, so at the end, just displaying the message. Go ahead and scroll back up now. So with this, we call connect, we build our connection string, and if everything works as it should, we'll get a connection successful displayed to the screen. This is actually a good point to go ahead and show something which is my preference, which is incremental builds. Do a piece of it, and then make sure it works before you go on to the next piece. So one thing we'll do here is I'll actually go and put a breakpoint in, and that will allow me to run it and check and make sure that the connection string looks correct. So I'll run with debug, which shortcut is F5. Here you'll see we've stopped at the breakpoint. I'm just going to go and mouse over const string. And you'll see that my const string says server, has my IP address, has the user ID, database admin, my super secret password of password, database name, port number, so everything looks good. I'm going to take the breakpoint out, just click on it, hit F5 so that the program keeps running. The one thing I'm going to do with that is because I didn't put in a way to stop it, I'll put a breakpoint in on line 33. That's the successful, and on my exception line, because otherwise it's running with debug, it's just going to close because I didn't put in anything to stop it. So I'll go ahead and run, and we'll see connection was successful. So everything is as it should be, everything is right and happy in the world. Yay! Okay, so if I just hit F5, it'll complete running and close out. What I can do so that we get a chance to see it before it closes, I'll actually do a write line here, go press a key to continue. If you've checked out any of the weekly videos, that should look pretty familiar. And I'll do a read key, so it just waits until we press something. And I like to space things out so it looks nice, or at least doesn't look all clumped together. Now if I just run it without the breakpoints, we'll see connection successful, press a key, and the program exits. So we know that we have the connection to the server. That's a huge first step. The next thing we need to do is actually get information from the server. We do that by sending a query to the server. For that, I'm actually going to click the minus right here. That will minimize all the code related to connect. The code's still there, it just hides it so I don't have to scroll past it. Same thing for the build connection string. I know that's working now. I'm just going to go ahead and hide it. So I can come down below here, down below build connection string, and I will create a new method. This one is going to be called QueryDB for querying the database. The query itself is just going to be a string that we pass in. And the data type that's going to return is actually a data table. This data type right here is the reason we needed the using statement for system.data. And that's the format the query is going to return, and it's a table of data. Now for the query, we're going to use a new structure called MySQL. It's apparently I can't type. MySQL data adapter. There we go. I'll just call it adapter. Now the constructor for this, and again it helps if I remember the new keyword. Look at the constructor, the version we want. We haven't created a SQL command, so what we want is a string command text in the connection. So in that case, we have a query being passed in. I'm going to hand that off to the SQL adapter. So that fulfills the command text. For the connection, we have our connection here as a part of the program class. We are a member of the program class, so we have access to that. We could do this underscore con, but this, we don't need it. Now this is going to stay red until we're actually returning a data table. But so far so good. This is how we'll actually execute the query and get our data back. I'll say we do need a data table to return, so we'll go ahead and create that now. I'll just go ahead and call it data. Now with the adapter, we need to tell it how to execute the command by setting the command type, which in this case we opted for the text. So here we go, command type and text is the version that we want. Then here's where the magic happens. Adapter.fill. We give it the data table to put the information in. And this is the part that will actually execute the query and put the data in, the results in the table or in the data table for us. So then we just go ahead and return the data. So to use that, we just use our instance, call the query database. Now here's where things get fun. We need to look at the database table and decide on some information that we want. So included with the file, the script that sets it up, is this PDF, which I have set to open up in Chrome, that shows the layout, which is this here. I've kind of zoomed in on it. Each box represents a table, and each of these items represents a column, and it shows you how much space is in each part or each thing in the column for each entry. So if I go ahead and look through here, and we have phones, we have users, we have email, user addresses, we have vehicles. Let's go ahead and see what we can find in the vehicle table. So we're going to pick a couple things. Let's go with make, model, and year. So we'll go ahead and get those 3 items out. Anywhere you see varchar, that means it's a string. Where you see int, that's going to be an int type. So we're going to say that we want make, model, and year. So we need to write a query for that. Let's say the syntax for that is we're going to say select. Select says, okay, we want this information. The information we want, we decided was the make. So we want make, model, just making sure I see how they're spelled and if they're capitalized or not, and year. Now we have to tell it where to select it from. This is where we're going to specify the table name. So the table name we can see is vehicle. And we also want to put a limit on it. We don't want everything in the table. So let's go with 30. No more than 30 cars from the table. This would actually give us the first 30, and that's okay. Now we're calling this. It does return a data table, so we do need to catch that. So I'll create a variable. I'm going to call it data here as well. That's okay because the scope where this one was called data ends at the curly brace, which means I can reuse the name in main without having a problem. So I'm going to call it data, create a variable. I'm not going to create an instance of the data table because I'm just going to use the one that comes back. I don't need to allocate memory and just let it disappear. Now the easiest way to get the data information out of this inside the data table is a bunch of rows, which is a data row collection. I'm just going to call it rows, plural. Gets, and we use data dot rows. Use the property. So that gives us a bunch of rows. Now for the assignment, you'll actually have to take the information and put it into a class. For this, I'm just going to go ahead and output it to the screen. Go for each data row. Call it row in rows, plural. And we're going to use a write line. For this, we're going to say, I'll use string interpolation again so we can make it look nice. Go make. Now in here, it's going to execute whatever's in there until it has a value to display. So for that, we're going to use the row. Can array index it, but actually acts like a dictionary because we're going to use a key for the index. In this case, your keys are going to be the columns you asked for information on. So we're doing make, so we'll use make here. We'll do another write line. This one will show model. And we'll do one more write line, and this one will be for the year. Now, for these, to use them, what you have to do is actually call toString. That's something that WriteLine would probably go ahead and do for you. If you want to do something else with it, you actually have to do toString, and then from there you can convert it. If it's supposed to be a decimal, or if it's supposed to be an int. If you toString it, then you can convert it. This is safe to use here because you actually know what the data is supposed to be, as long as you're not trying to convert it into the wrong thing. Like we know year is int, the other two are supposed to be strings. Since we're just displaying them, we'll just go ahead and do toString. And I'll add one more write line just to get an extra line in there. So we'll go ahead and run it. And we'll see that a whole bunch of car information was output. So the query was successful. It came back and returned a bunch of cars. Have the make, the model, the year. And we're good to go. We've successfully connected to the database. We've executed a query on the database and handled the information that came out of it. The one other thing you do want to make sure you do is we have the connection to the database. To be good citizens, we should close the connection. And performance-wise, you won't see any difference in the program, but that makes sure that we free up that connection so that the server can allow somebody else to use it. And it's just good practice. Are there any questions? So there's a question asking if it's okay to use MySQL command gets new MySQL command and not the data table. If you understand how to use it, that's perfectly acceptable as long as you can get the data out. If you have trouble using that method and it's not something that I showed, then I'm going to be less willing to support it. I'm not saying I won't help you out, but the preferred method initially is going to be at least what I've shown you. But again, this goes to programming in general. There's a lot of different ways to do things. If you can get the same result, as long as it meets whatever requirements are in the document, it doesn't matter how you do it. Unless the document specifically states you need to do this or that, then you do have to do this or that. Okay, I'll just throw it out there one more time. Are there any other questions? Okay, not seeing any more questions, so I'm going to say let's have some fun with this assignment, and everybody have a great night.